Hey YouTube, Twig here, bringing you all an update to my Qliphort Yugioh deck profile for April 2022. I've always been a fan of the Qliphort or Qliphort deck, however you want to pronounce it, and the pendulum aspect behind it. I would say it was one of the more meta-relevant pendulum decks before some of the other ones like Pendulum Magicians and Pepe really started kicking off. A very simplistic pendulum style where it can basically summon out a bunch of Qliphort monsters, then you tribute those Qliphort monsters for even bigger Qliphort monsters from your hand that have different monster effects. I wanted to do an update to the deck. It's been well over a year since the last update, and also with skill drain at 3, thanks to the latest ban list, we have a deck that can definitely help with a lot of shutdown of the opponent's plays with a lot of the trap backup and the overall pendulum style. So let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the Qliphort monsters, we are running 3 of probably the most important one is Qliphort Scout. It is a normal monster, but in the pendulum scale. It has a search effect, being able to pay 800 life points to add a Qli card from your deck to your hand. It's not a once per turn, so you can even set another Scout if need be, if this one gets destroyed, and then activate it again, or even bounce it back to your hand with one of your other Qliphort monsters, like Qliphort Stealth, and then reuse it again and again. The only thing that's a risk with this card is obviously the use of life points to search out those cards, but it can help because it can complete your pendulum scale or just search out any of the other one of Qli cards that we run also. I also run 3 Qliphort Carrier with this card. It's more of the tribute fodder that you'll use for your other bigger Qliphort monsters. This card gives a tribute option of when you tribute it for the summon of a Qliphort monster to then bounce a monster on your opponent's field back to their hand. So with it, you have the option of the bounce power that Qliphort Carrier provides, and then the spell and trap destruction power that Qliphort Helix provides when this one's tributed. So if you have Carrier and Helix on the field, you can tribute out one of your bigger Qliphort monsters for these cards, and then gain both of their card effects when they are tributed. And then they also share the different pendulum scale card effects, giving either a boost or lowering the attack of one of your opponent's monsters on the field, not one, all of them, and then boosting all of your Qli monsters on the field also. For some of the lower numbers for the Qliphort monsters, I also run 2 Qliphort Stealth. This one is the bounce one I spoke of before. You can normal summon this card without tributing, but when it's normal summoned, it becomes a level 4, and its original attack becomes 1800. This monster effect is also shared by all the Qliphort monsters, so remember that. But with Stealth, when it is summoned, it can bounce a card on the field, and your opponent cannot activate anything in response to the bounce. So you can either bounce one of your opponent's cards or return it to the hand, in other words, and then with that return, you can return cards like Qliphort Scout that I mentioned before, and then reset the scale and get another search. And also, if it's the last part of the chain, since your opponent can't respond to it, all the other cards will respond in order. So tributing out the 2 Qliphort monsters for Stealth, and then you just go chain link 1, 2, and 3, and then you get the destruction, the additional bounce from Carrier, and then the bounce from Stealth on the field. And then for the one-ofs for the Qliphort monsters, I run 1 Qliphort Monolith. This is the scale you want to have set up with Scout because it has the tribute option for every card you tribute. You draw a number of cards equal to the number of Qli monsters you tributed for a tribute summon this turn, just replenishing your hand with plenty of cards, and the perfect scale setup. And it's also searchable with cards like Summoner Art. Also 1 Qliphort Shell. Shell has the option of being able to attack twice and also inflicting piercing battle damage to your opponent. And lastly, for the one-ofs, the 1 Qliphort Disc for the special summon power. When it's summoned out, you can special summon 2 Qliphort monsters onto the field, and just giving you more resources to set up in the extra deck to then pendulum summon back out on the field. The ones I like to summon out with Disc are Carrier and Helix, because then those are the ones that you'll want to tribute for your other Qliphort monsters. And that is it for the monsters. I do run a pretty low monster count, but we do run plenty of searchers in the deck for the spells, and those searchers include Sacrifice. This card has 4 different card effects. You equip only to a Qli monster. It gains 300 attack and cannot be destroyed by battle. The equipped monster can be treated as 2 tributes for the tribute summon of a Qli monster, and if this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can add 1 Qli monster from your deck to your hand. This is another card you could potentially search off of Qliphort Scout, since it does have Qli in its name, but giving the boost and protection, it is one you definitely do want to rely on overall, and then just having an additional search on top of it, so when you tribute off that monster that it's equipped to, you'll gain the actual search from Sacrifice as well. And I also run one laser Qliphort. This one is the field spell. During your main phase, you can normal summon one Qli monster in addition to your normal summoner set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. This comes in handy if you don't have the pendulum option set up right away, because you can at least then normal summon out either Helix or Carrier, and then immediately afterwards, since they only require one tribute them out for then that other monster. They'll have their original attack, and the monster effect will activate of the one you tributed on the field. For more search power, once again, going back to Monolith and Qliphort Scout, I run 3 Summoner's Art. This card just searches out either one of the level 5 normal monsters. So having the option for multiple scouts in the deck, just having the multiple Summoner Arts also as a not a once per turn, you can add all of them to your hand that much more quickly and then reduce the deck down to what you may want to potentially draw for a good number of the trap lineup. But for more draw power, I also run 3 Pot of Extravagance. I really do like this card in the deck. You don't revolve around the extra deck at all. So at the start of your main phase, you banish 3 or 6 random cards face down from your extra deck, and then draw 1 card for every 3 cards banished. For the rest of this turn, after this card resolves, you cannot draw any cards by effects, but you add cards with cards like Qliphort Scout, so it's all the good there, or by sacrifice. But once again, you don't really go into the extra deck at all, since your pendulum scales prevent you from special summoning cards aside from Qli monsters, and with the banish from your extra deck, you just have those options available to you for additional draw power using this card. For more draw power in the deck, I also run 2 Pot of Duality and the 1 Pot of Desire. More setup in search. You can go a turn without pendulum summoning with the Qliphort deck. You can just go for a normal summon and then an equip of Sacrifice. And the Pot of Desires, running the multiples. I was risking it with the low number of monsters we run, but like I said, you only need the 2 or 3 Qliphort monsters to fully execute the combo, and a lot of them can be searched out of the deck thanks to Qliphort Scout before you even go for the banish with Pot of Desires. And it's a one-of, so it's just all coming down to if you actually see it or not in your hand. And that is it for the spells. Moving on now to the traps. Like I said, off the ban list and fresh at 3 Skill Drain. I love this card at full power in this deck originally. When we had full power pendulums and you can pendulum summon as many cards as you want from the extra deck, the consistency was insane. And just being able to shut down my opponent's monsters on the field with Skill Drain was all the better. So with this card at 3, it just adds for more chances of me grabbing this card, even if it were to be potentially banished by cards like Pot of Desire, and then being able to still have my Qliphort monster tribute effect. So even if I do summon out a Qliphort monster and its effect is negated, it will at least reduce the card effect, so it won't be coming out as a level 4 monster with 1800 attack. When you normal summon it, it will be its full powered attack and defense stats on the field. Then you can just swing at your opponent with the big beater Qliphort monsters you have and still resolve your tribute card effects like Carrier and Helix with this card on the field. For more shutdown of my opponent's plays, I also run 3 Summon Limit. This card shuts down a lot, just like Skill Drain. Being able to only summon twice per turn can hurt a lot of decks, but it doesn't really hurt the Qliphort deck at all because your 2 plays will either be your Pendulum Summon and then your Tribute Summon. That's your 2 summons right then and there. You'll Pendulum Summon out the Qliphorts you need for the Tribute, and then Tribute them for your normal summon. And there's the 2 summons needed by Summon Limit. And for more lockdown, I also run 3 Gozen Match and 2 of the Rivalry of Warlords. The Gozen Match shut down the attributes of monsters. You only run, so you only need to run 1 attribute anyway, and that being the Earth attribute in the Qliphort deck. And Rivalry of Warlords stops the monster types, which all the Qliphorts are machine. So then you'll be limited to that. No, limit or lockdown to your deck, but definitely to your opponent depending on what they're playing. And then for the rest of the traps, I just run the 2 lose 1 turn. You activate this card only if there are currently no special summon monsters on the field that you control. And while monsters face up on the field, negate its effects. And during the turn that that monster was special summoned, its effect is special summoned in attack position, and you change it to defense position. Putting it on the defensive, it's not as good against link monsters, but still stops more of the other monster effects that your opponent may try to run against this deck, since it stops the special summon play, which is definitely heavily focused on a lot of decks. I think the big weakness would be against the Flundere's deck, obviously, but there are other cards that you can use to completely get around that deck, like Skill Drain and Summon Limit. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. The extra deck is pretty generic because we're going to go through a lot of cards for the banish for cards like Pot of Extravagance. So I'm running 3 Qliphort Genius. This is just the link monster having additional options when you get this link monster out. If you summon 2 the arrows at the same time, which you'll do with a pendulum summon, giving you more of a special summon option, being able to target a card on each player's field except this card, and then both those targets have their effects negated. So stopping your Qliphort, but also being more like a Skill Drain card. But like I said, this card's at 3 in the deck, just so you do potentially have a chance to keep one of them in the extra deck when you banish your cards for Extravagance. I also run 2 Barricade Board Blocker, more of a recycle card for the field spell in the deck, and running 2, so you once again had less chance to banish. And the rest of the extra deck are pretty generic. The 1 Asa the Earth Charmer, the 1 Nightmare Cerberus, 1 Nightmare Phoenix, 1 IP Masquerena, and the 1 Nightmare Unicorn. Remember, these will only really be summoned if I have no Pendulum Scales, and I'm just resorting to the extra deck plays to get around some of my opponent's cards if I couldn't make a scale to Pendulum Summon. And then for the Xyz monsters, the 1 Exciton Knight, 1 Tornado Dragon, the 1 Abyss Dweller, the 1 Baguska, and the 1 Magister Paladin. I chose level 4 just because when you do have the option for the extra deck, most of the time they're going to be the normal summon Qliphort monsters that you summoned out that you will then overlay into. And this is once again if you don't have any Pendulum Scales set up. I thought of running the Cyber Dragon Infinity play in the deck, but that would more than likely risk, getting hit for a couple of the banishes with Extravagance. And if I hit Cyber Dragon Infinity, then I just have a Cyber Dragon Nova, and then vice versa in the deck that I really can't do much with. And then as for the go-to plays in the deck, this is really a back row kind of setup pendulum deck. So when you set up the Qliphort Scout, depending on what else you open up in your hand will determine what you search for with the Scout. If you have a monster, then more than likely you'll want to search for the Sacrifice, being able to then count that monster that you normal summon out as 2 tributes, equipping onto it. And then being able to tribute 2 monsters if you have cards like Laser Cleat. You can also just go for the additional normal summon of that card, but a big part of the play will be completing your scale with Scout. So if you search out the 1 scale and then pendulum summon that monster out, then you still have your normal summon where you can equip the Sacrifice and then go for the tribute depending on what Qliphort monster you summon out. And also this will come down to you also setting up back row to stop any of your opponent's play while still having your big Qliphort monster that is also unaffected by anything that is lower than its level or rank equal to the level of the Qliphort monster. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoy the video. I always love updating the Qliphort deck. It's a fun one for sure if you're looking to learn more about pendulums. You don't really know how they work because the monster effects for this deck is pretty simplistic and easy to just set up the scales and then go for the pendulum summon and then your tribute summon. But as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and Kira Twig out.